So real quick, yeah, I just restarted my part-time teaching career at Clark. Some of my Clark students are here today. They're in the back. Raise your hand. Teach my new Weather 101 class up there. Yeah. And help my PCC Weather 101 students are back here. So raise your hands. So good to see you folks. Appreciate that. Okay. So let's talk here about my forecast. So real quick plug here for my agency, Columbia Enterprise. The reason I'm here. So the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, otherwise known as CRITFC, we are the largest Native American science center in the Pacific Northwest, one of the largest in the United States, having 170 staff, 4 offices, and we are immune from the government shutdown because we're tribal government, not federal government, so yay, go tribes. Put that in there. So yes, I'm their staff hydrologist, meteorologist working here on salmon recovery, so that's a good thing. So I always like to do a quick review. How well did my forecast from last year play out here? So although these were the individual months, as far as you see the forecast there, kind of regular font than the one in boldface, as far as what actually occurred here, it's useful to know when you're doing a climate forecast, what's like the average of those 5 winter months here. So if you look at the average here, for temperature, a little bit warmer than usual, about 2.4 over the course of the season here. And with the precip here, 105%, which is a little bit more than average. But remember, we had this really strange year, and I'm going to put on my weather man's cap as far as hydrology, is that we had bone dry January, bone dry April, May, and June, 4 months, a third of the year dry. That really, really hurt the salmon. We actually got the salmon out initially during May and June, but it was really dry, hostile, very warm late summer, so salmon didn't do so good, unfortunately, in that regard. As far as snow events here, I was forecasting 4 events last year, and obviously I missed that. As Mark pointed out here, we had this base, the one big event here with a 3-inch total. So I was predicting 5.5 inches. I was off by half here, which is definitely not a good sign. But I'll do better this time because bubbles promises, right? Hood River, our agency has a law enforcement office there that patrol the river from Penland all the way to Bonneville Dam. And so the forecast was actually very good out there, really close toward near normal, same with the precip. So my 3 major forecast points, Portland, Hood River, and Government Camp, this was the best of the 3 unexpectedly here. So this was good news for our officers out there in Hood River. And then Government Camp here was kind of all over the map here, a little bit warmer than expected here for the temperature, but fairly close. Definitely way down here in terms of the precip, 68% versus the forecast seasonal 105%. And 190 inches worth of snow versus 290, so off quite a bit there. Only 69% versus 134%, so definitely was not good up the mountains, definitely not good for snowmelt runoff as far as down the tributaries and the main stem of Columbia. So the water supply forecast I gave you last year here, 103 million acre feet forecast, 101%. We got down to 81 maps, so the forecast was off quite a bit here. So the salmon really suffered. Once we had that dry January, our regional water supply never recovered after that, unfortunately. So we'll see if we can improve things here for this year's forecast. So new slide here this year. So all the forecasts actually have one thing in common here, this thing called a teleconnection. We look at the tropical Pacific, what's happening there in terms of ENSO, in terms of La Nina, El Nino, and these teleconnections mean that something happens here, and we have this long distance connection going over like 1,000 miles or more to the west coast, wherever here. And so this fans out across the entire Pacific Ocean. So that's what we as forecasters look at. We look at these different environmental metrics. Of course, April's going to talk about her forecast and Tanis. We're looking at different, environmental metrics. But which one of these metrics are you looking at? Which one do you feel lucky about? But really, this is the connection here as far as making all these things connect together across the Pacific. So wondering how come we can actually forecast, like many months in the future. It's really because of teleconnections and seeing what's happening in the Pacific and what's going to happen here on the West Coast. I thought I'd make that little plug here for everyone here, so April's just smiling. So my forecast method is really a composite of several different metrics here. So using this really holistic big picture view here. For one thing, I'm kind of like the sunspot guy. People know me as Mr. Sunspot. So I built upon the work of my friend Dr. Theodore Landscheid, who sadly is no longer with us here. He built an empirical computer model that looked at the relationship between sunspot forcing here and what happens on Earth as far as, like you saw, the peak of sunspot spot cycles in general corresponding with El Nino or El Nino-like weather, and the bottom of the sunspot cycle as far as having more like La Nina conditions. And so he was able to predict out these ENSO events, not just months, but years in the future. Sadly, he's no longer around. No one's picked up his work. So as far as the Tropical Pacific, I look here what I think is probably the best multivariable index here, the MEI. That's been kind of my primary predictor here for the last 20 years, been doing this. The sea surface temperature departure forecast, which we get from NOAA, that's downloaded this morning's forecast. And then my unique hydroclimate approach here, as far as looking here, kind of a two-step process. I look at what's the intended water supply forecast based upon historical runoff, the Columbia River at the Dalles, and kind of correlate that with MEI, so I come up with a forecast. Once I have a forecast, I back calculate, I back engineer with what I call the right mixture of 20 past water years. I use the word right because I have no idea if I'm right until a year from now. We kind of do our own retrospective analysis. So I always put right there in quotes here. So unlike last year, where I used a lot of La Niñas, this year I'm using kind of more of a balanced here of both La Nina and ENSO neutral here. So hopefully this will be a better approach. So these were the specific years that I used here. So remember last year I only used like 3 ENSO neutral years and 17 La Nina years, because at least the data at the time suggested we could maybe be between like a weak to moderate La Nina. Didn't happen. So this year I've split the difference a little bit right in half. Half La Nina, half El Nino, so I think it'd be good. And also of this 20 years here, 8 of them, color-coded here in green here, are the ones that are sitting on the border of La Nina and ENSO neutral. So I think I'm going to have a better forecast this year because of that here. And whenever possible, I try to have like at least 1 or 2, preferably 3 or 4 years per decade here, going all the way back to the 1930s, including the present. I specifically did not include water year 2025 because that was such a screwball year. We don't know why we had these 4 months of dryness, so I'm not including my analysis here until us weather folks kind of get figure that out here. So anyway, this is a nice blend here of the years, and so that's what forms the basis of my forecast. So first off, let's look at sunspots. So as Jim Todd mentioned here, we had the peak of the sunspot cycle here a year ago, that summer. That perhaps maybe might have played a role in some of the dryness, because again, what Landscheid found, we are toward the peak of the sunspot cycle, we're more vulnerable toward, like, let's say El Nino or El Nino-like weather. We know it's drier than normal, so that perhaps maybe partially explain the dryness here. But since we're moving now toward the low end of the sunspot cycle, that basically we're moving toward La Nina winter. So the sunspot counts are moving us in the right direction as far as La Nina, even if it's a weak one. Then looking here at what NOAA puts out here in partnership with Columbia University here. This is very similar to last year's graphic here, kind of showing the overall average, the models here being about -0.5 degree, which is the threshold definition for La Nina. So it shows that we should hit La Nina for a few months. Hopefully we'll actually get across the La Nina threshold. So Tom and I will be shouting big kudos for that here. So hopefully we'll be in La Nina here very, very soon. We're definitely moving here in the right direction. Okay, as of this morning here, as of 3 hours ago, so this is the latest from NOAA as far as their sea surface temperature departure forecast. What's good to know here, in the tropical Pacific, we tend to see colder than normal water here. So these graphics indicate here, it looks like this year's La Nina will probably peak in November and December here, which is totally within historic norms. So that's definitely a good sign to see that happen here. And just a quick updated chart is that now the stronger the sea surface temperature departure, the stronger the ENSO event. So the case of La Nina, definitely looking here toward the weak side, given this is going to be about maybe -0.5, maybe -1. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay, and again, I like MEI here. It's been a tracking signal here since 1950. Looking here at 5 major parameters: oceanic sea level pressure, 2-dimensional wind vectors, the sea surface temperature, the surface air temperature, and the fraction of cloud cover above that. So it's a really nice 5-element weighted average here. I think really describes what's happening good here in the tropical Pacific. And there was brief mention here about the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, otherwise known as the PDO. What happens with PDO is that either it enhances or dampens the ENSO signal. And since this is negative, which is also in the same swing here of La Nina here, and this is definitely much stronger than a year ago, I think the PDO will actually help enhance the formation here of this La Nina event here along with the sunspots. I think those 2 things will really help us move in the direction of La Nina this year. So definitely this is very favorable toward La Nina conditions. Okay, so when I produce my forecast, I also do like an ensemble forecast of those 20 past years, what our hydrology picture will look like here. So the blue line is the really long-term average. So the deep red line here shows what will be the average showing. That'll be a little bit below kind of normal in springtime, which is good. Means that we've got snowpack in the mountains. It's going to kind of wait till it shoots its load here in late May, early June here. So it looks like, and this is again without the effect of the dams here, this unregulated flow here. 500,000 CFS. Remember, bank full is 450. Flood flow at Port of Vancouver is 550. So it'll be hopefully maybe near bank full, which would be good news for the salmon. So salmon need to have some good news for a change. We'll see how it all plays out. Okay, one thing I'm doing differently this year, folks, I'm actually using graphics for my forecast, realizing some of you sit way in the back here. Look at my Clark students here. Is this easy to read, seen in graphical form? Yes? Okay, good. No, that suggestion was given to me last year since I give this presentation at some of the senior centers. Our seniors, they can't see your numbers. So graphics, this makes it much easier. So looking here from the river here, we're essentially looking like near normal in December and February. A little bit on the warmer side here for November, January, and a little bit below here for March. Precip-wise here, we're essentially going to be maybe a little below normal in December, January, but above normal here, not by much, but 105, 110% here, November, February, and March. As far as the snow forecast here, I'm predicting several snow events here in the gorge here, about 110% normal. So if you're into snow out there in the gorge, this is your season here for it, with a seasonal total here of 26 inches. And so the forecast here for each month here, I've got the average of those 20 years. So like November is that quarter inch, that's the average of the 20 years. With the upper end, the standard deviation, so up to 1 inch. In December, 8-inch snowfall total for the month, maybe up to 18. Same thing for January, a little bit less in February with 7 inches, and then March 2 inches. So it's going to be, I'd say, a decent winter out here in the gorge. Now, government camp can be a little bit on the warm side in January, and I think the NOAA forecast was showing it here. A little bit slightly warm here in November, but essentially at or below normal here for like December, really going through for May here. So basically, that's going to preserve the snowpack next year, which would be great news for snow runoff here next spring, summer. Really good news for the salmon. On the precip forecast here, other than perhaps maybe April being a little bit below normal, it's essentially at or above, up to as much as 115% normal here in February, right smack in the middle of water supply season, which is definitely a good sign here. And then here for the snowfall forecast here. So looking here, maybe a little bit below normal here in November here, essentially near normal. And of course, now May looks to be a little high because remember the normals actually get smaller as we get to springtime. So even if you have, let's say, like a wintertime snowfall, it's going to artificially jack up the springtime normals here. So just take that with a grain of salt here. But the fact is, we're basically going to be looking at perhaps maybe about like 140% here in April. So that's, I think, we're going to see not just late winter, but early springtime snow accumulation. So that'd be good news for you skiers and you snowboarders out there. I think that would be good. So I'm looking here for a grand seasonal total of 269-inch base up there around government camp, or 140% normal. This kind of tells me we actually might see more snow in the mountains, maybe a little bit less rainfall down the valley. So this is kind of good news. It's the best news for all users out here in that regard here. Okay, so for the Portland forecast, I'm looking here for about being kind of like near normal, a little bit on the warmer side here for November and January, but a little bit on the cooler side, December, February, and March. Precip-wise, looking here, be having a wet November here, being not overly wet, 105% normal, being a little bit dry in December, then we kind of get back up kind of toward a little below normal here in January and February, and then being just a little bit above normal here in March. As far as variability, because we're kind of like sitting near that border here between like ENSO neutral and La Nina, and then with the impact of the sunspots and PDO, I'm thinking like really high variability, so a little bit of everything. Hard rain events, which is coming up later on this week, floods, fog, windstorms, the gorge wind, freezing rain. Notice I'm making no mention here as far as like extended dry period like we just had, because with La Nina, we're not supposed to have dry periods, as Tanya knows also well. So that may very not occur. We'll see how it all plays out here. With the water supply, though, we're looking here for 100 million acre-feet, which is about near normal, which, with La Nina, we're expecting a little more, but hey, it was so dry last year. Even if we're just a little bit low this year, we'll take it. It'll be good news for the salmon if we can stay here normal here in that regard here. So what about the snow events here? Okay, so you know the routine here. Drum roll. Bumbles is going to give his snow forecast here. Ta-da! So Bumbles and I were expecting 3 snow events here this winter, 1 moderate one, because the trend the last few years has actually been like 1 moderate sized snow event, and maybe a handful of the lighter ones. So moderate one about 2 or 3 inches. And as you know, living in Portland for a while, and of course Tanya's got a smell so different than eastern Montana, that it only takes 7 snowflakes to shut down the city of Portland. Well, that Tanya, this is true. Yeah, 7, my first winter here, they were closed down Sylvan Overpass because there were 7 snowflakes. I called my family and spoke, man, these people are fucking crazy out here. Try one winter in Spokane and come back and talk to me, right? So yeah, so 1 moderate event, 2 minor ones here. So looking really no snow in November, because sometimes we get snow there. About maybe 2.5 inches in December, which actually would make it the snowiest month. We haven't had a snowy December in a long time, so we're like overdue for that, other than perhaps what, December of 2008. So potentially up to 7 inches. So keep an eye on December. January here looking about like 1.5 inches, same thing for February, because the last year's and Mark Nelson's know we've actually had January and February as being really like more of our snowier months. We haven't had a major dumping. My data suggests keep an eye on December this year. This could be the surprise month here for all of us here. So I'm looking here with a probability, a little bit of snow in March, maybe like the first week of March. 65%, 80% probability chance with a seasonal total about 5.5 inches. So kind of like more like nuisance snow here, but again, we're going to see that one sort of mid-sized event here sometime, likely now, probably in December. So we'll see what all happens here. So anyway, that's my forecast, and thank you for your time.